Okay, so the cathedral once again proves its existence and how incestuous of a relationship
You
journalists
guys
have with
really
each
gotta
other.
stop using that word. It's
Journalist.
nepotistic. No. Well, that as well. I've seen someone recommended use journalists instead of journalists because
Journalists.
that's what they are.
Was it PewDiePie who said journalist?
I don't know,
heard
but
it in
I've
the
heard it.
the quartering.
I
The
think I've
quartering
heard.
says it all the time.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
quartering. Maybe sticks. I'm not sure. No, the quartering definitely. Anyway, stop using incestuous. Use nepotistic. That's the right word.
Well, no, that's a different thing. So the use of the word is actually accurate.
There's nothing wrong with nepotism.
So, like, the two definitions of incestuous are involving or guilty of incest, which isn't what I'm talking about, or two, of human relations generally, excessively close and resistant to outside influence. And the example given is the incestuous nature of literary journalism.
All right.
So it's the fact that they're these supposedly independent outlets or whatever, but in reality they all have these like close other. They have these close relationships with each other and are basically this like cartel. So that's like the definition of the word I'm using.
All right. Anyway, keep going.
So, journalists with journalists with their maybe incestuous relationship to the cathedral. Two experts are offering insights to help journalists make sense of the recent controversy around critical race theory, a decades-old legal framework for examining how US laws and systems have perpetuated racism. Well, just from the fucking byline, you can see that they're already on a side. Decades-old legal framework. No, a decades-old piece of bullshit. Like, US laws and systems have... How US laws and systems have perpetuated racism.
For a while.
I'm sorry, but we fucking got rid of all the systematic racism. Like, there was this big thing in the 60s.
Yeah, but haven't you understood that that was evil and unprogressive?
Oh,
and
right. I keep forgetting that we don't like that guy called Martin Luther King. That whole treating people like the conscience. Yeah.
He was really evil, after all. I heard he owned slaves.
Well,
in that he had children, yeah.
He did oppress an African American woman.
Oh my god, no.
He made the children do chores. And they were black.
Oh no, how could he?
And sometimes he hit them.
How could he?
Discipline? What is that?
Yeah.
What is this?
Right, so they waffle on about, meanwhile, even as critics call critical race theory un-American and a divisive political movement, it appears people on all sides of the issue have different understandings of what it actually is. Yes, the bullshit definition you keep claiming it has, and the one that everyone else is using.
Well, on Reddit, I run into a lot of people who are like, oh, critical race, just somebody else misunderstanding what it actually is. And it's like, I notice all of the conservatives are like fucking citing the actual authors and like proponents of critical race theory, like the people who have contributed academic work to it. The conservatives are quoting all of them, while the journalists just kind of hand wave it and go, well, that's not real critical race theory. It's like,
just like anything written by Marx isn't real communism.
Well, critical race theory
hasn't been specified.
Critical race theory is just teaching that slavery happened.
Robin DeAngelo is not a critical theorist. She's just teaching whiteness studies.
Critical race theory is not an ideology or a political orientation that assumes white people are bad. It assumes white supremacy is bad in all of its forms. Well, that's not even fucking close to what it is.
It's an idea.
I mean, again, if it doesn't assume that white people are bad, it shouldn't use whiteness as like the term for it is.
Yeah, or as some fuckwit says, it's a practice or approach that provides language and a lens for examining racism at institutional and structural levels. Okay, so when we intentionally discriminate against whites and Asians at universities, what's that?
Yeah.
Racial justice?
Affirmative
Well, I mean-
action. AKA...
I mean, again, systemic racism. Yeah, but I mean, again, like if they're not saying white people are bad, they shouldn't use the term whiteness. Hey, Bezic, say Bezic is a piece of shit and should be burned at the stake. Oh, don't worry, it doesn't mean anything bad about you. It's just the sociological definition of that phrase is that pedophilia is bad. So if you don't say Bezic is a piece of shit and should be burned at the stake, I have no choice but to conclude you're pro-pedophilia. Like, no, you wouldn't say the phrase because it is inherently demeaning to yourself, even if hypothetically the ideology behind it was innocent, which it isn't.
It's all a game of language.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and this is coming from the same like people that go on about microaggressions, that it's a microaggression to ask somebody where they're from, but using whiteness as the term for that which is bad is somehow not offensive.
Well,
To be honest, anytime someone says microaggression to me, is I give them a microaggression for it.
so
I
the
tend to
some-
get macro-aggressive.
If somebody ever accuses me of a microaggression, I'm just gonna give them like a brief, solemn nod, and if they like ask me what that was, I'm gonna be like, "Oh, it was a micro."
a micro what?
Apology.
Ah,
No, just punch them straight in the face.
Macroaggression. Come on. Go big or go home. You're American after all.
Don't waste your fucking time.
so some other bullshit that they're coming out with. I think there's some mischaracterization going on here, some fuckwit says. Because critical race theory has the word race in it. Perhaps people are intentionally equating critical race theory with anything having to do with race or the teaching of racism.
What?
Excuse me, what?
But they literally said.
But you're
We all
literally...
this in the article.
Like, yes,
they're
you're literally
misunderstanding
saying...
that critical race theory has something to do with.
Yeah, despite the fact that it assumes white supremacy is bad in all of its forms, and it's a lens for examining racism at institutional and structural levels. Therefore, it has nothing to do with racism.
I like
What?
when they say. I like when they say assumes it's bad in all its forms, in that they're not sure that it's bad in all of its forms.
Oh yeah, they can't prove that white supremacy is bad in all its forms.
Let's,
Well,
I like
of course,
when-
because
let's find the good kind of white supremacy. I'm down for that.
No, that's
I
actually what
think
they
I think
believe
it's more of a veiled
Is it-
implication. No, it's more
Is
of a
it
veiled implication.
punctuality the good bit? Punctuality is maybe
No,
the
no,
good bit.
no,
Maybe
I think it's-
the work ethic.
I think it's more of a veiled implication that people who disagree with critical race theory don't think white supremacy is bad.
Jesus.
no, but they actually believe in racial awakening, and that implies racial awakening for white people too.
Oh,
So
no, but
believe
white people can't have that.
in their view, there is a good way to be white supremacist.
Well, my question is always this: I am not a white supremacist. I do not believe in white supremacy. Okay,
Cough, cough.
but are we absolutely sure that white people aren't superior? Because
I mean,
Well, I mean,
depends-
according to the Smithsonian,
depends on who you
Inquirer,
ask,
they
actually.
because it seems to be their argument a lot of the time that they are.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's it.
Like,
All
well,
the black people need all
reminds me
this
of what-
extra treatment because they're not because they're not superior.
Yeah, but how did the white people?
We're better
I mean,
than
how
you, and
did
we're
this
going
white
to
superior?
help you.
I'm just thinking like this white superiority thing. Like if for the whites to have become the superior one, as in running everything, and in the first place, is it possible that they achieved that through actually being superior in the first place, or is it just a timeline issue? Certainly, when I was going to say, when they arrived in those places with their boats and their guns and all that kind of stuff, they probably were somewhat superior at the time.
Well, it reminds me of that Sargon versus Thomas Smith. Thomas Smith said, "Freedom allows white people to control everything," and Sargon just goes, "Oh my God, you're a white supremacist. You are a white supremacist with a guilty conscience, Thomas."
But that's actually what it is.
I mean, he just absolutely annihilated that guy that day. It was just, it's. I go back and watch it occasionally because it's just fucking hilarious. It's just, people say that Carl should be in jail for what he said to fucking Jess Phillips. He should be in jail for the fucking full-blown murder of that man.
I mean, yeah, but he's a free man now. You can't hold
absolute fucking carnage. That is just. I've never seen anything out of that guy ever again either. As well, it's just.
Yeah.
Hey, can you post that one in memes or art? No, that's a piece of art. Post it in art wall if you could, because I can't find that video.
I got you.
Thank you.
Yeah, you get on YouTube, no problem. I mean, it just absolutely takes him apart to the point where he doesn't stay for the Q&A. He just walks off.
Yeah.
He walks off in the middle of the Q&A. At one point, somebody in the Q&A is like, "How do you deal with cognitive dissonance?" Sargon's like, "I don't have cognitive dissonance because my positions are ideologically consistent." How about you, Thomas?
It's just fucking beautiful.
Oh.
And then the guy constantly goes going on, well, the crowds are all here for you. And it's like, well, what does that fucking tell you? You know, it's as I'm acting as if Sargon's paid them all to be there or something. No, your arguments are shit, and the crowd aren't with you. It's like Sargon individually invited everybody to be there. Isn't it?
Stop preaching to the crowd, Thomas.
It's just.
I just wish we could have more moments like this. I just wish we could have more videos like this, where just like the people from each side sit down, just have a talk. And if one's a fucking idiot, then he gets butchered as he deserves.
You used to get loads of video. Hitchens used to just destroy people on the daily. I mean,
yeah.
That's why none of them will debate the right now, because they fucking get annihilated.
You only
have to scratch through a thin veneer of ideology, and then their fucking worldview collapses.
What it reminds me of is the Jordan Peterson gotcha moment.
Yeah. Ha! Gotcha.
With what's her face?
Kathy Newman, is it?
Kathy Newman.
Kathy Newman.
Yeah.
I mean, like that should have ended her career, really, but it didn't. But it should have.
I wish it did.
I mean, ended it in the sense that she was never taken seriously again, because she's absolutely destroyed.
Well,
have you guys
and left her going like, "Oh, she won the debate." Fucking how?
Again, I think Kathy Newman gets too much hate relatively, because I genuinely think Kathy Newman was like more charitable towards him than most of the people on the left who have interviewed him.
Maybe.
No, she was out.
No, that's not a maybe. If you've seen,
it doesn't matter. She's a fucking idiot, regardless of whether she was actively out to get him. It doesn't fucking matter. She's just a piece of shit. She's useless, and she has no place trying to educate people.
And then she tried the old death threat bullshit afterwards, and that she needed security. and then when asked to provide details, couldn't provide a single fucking tweet or text to suggest that she'd been actually abused.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm not defending her.
Jordan
I'm just
Peterson?
saying that other people are worse, have been worse than her and have gotten a lot less hate than she has for their interviewing of Peterson.
But she was suggesting that Peterson had whipped up a group to come after her on Twitter, and then couldn't provide any evidence for it at all.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sort of like, I don't think you should be. Half of me thinks you shouldn't be able to be anonymous online, because I think it would end the argument instantly. I think you'd find out that actually most Twitter trolls are actually women.
So you have
No,
a simple argument.
Yeah,
No,
I enjoy anonymity too much to.
Yeah, I
have it
know, but
sacrificed.
just for a just for a while. We'll just give it up for 6 months to do some studies.
No,
get
but
it back.
The chances we get it
just
back
gonna
after
lock
6
down.
months is minuscule.
We're just gonna
back
lock
to you, I
down
assure
for
it.
2 weeks, 14 days to
Yeah,
slow
I
the spread.
know.
You know.
I know.
Yeah.
But like, one of my buddies, he's a psychologist. He's done a few studies for the government, and he used like language. So they used like language filters. So what they're doing is they were looking at all the language of these tweets and texts and stuff, and it's going like the language of this does not support that it's a man that is texting this, because it just the way men frame, like, on average frame sentences and things, like it's just not the way. It's not the way a man that would make a rape threat and things like that is what they're saying. You know,
Right.
this is the language of. And men don't generally. Men tend to threaten violence rather than rape. You know, and they basically say like he's sure, absolutely sure, like 85% of all rape threats come from women pretending to be men, not men. Because
That makes sense.
because what he's saying is a woman imagines the worst thing that could happen to her to be rape, and a man considers the worst thing to happen to you to be a physical violence or an embarrassment. So when men threaten men, they threaten them with physical violence or with embarrassment. Whereas he's saying, well, women pretending to be men threaten women with rape. Is the logic of it, but
I see.
What's funny about rape?
Everything. What? What's this about?
not rape if you shit, surprise.
Right, so back to critical race theory. So
No.
what they argue it is that critical race theory critiques how the social construction of race and institutionalized racism perpetuate a racial caste system that relegates people of color to the bottom tiers. Fucking what? Foundational questions that underlie CRT and
This is the same person who said that it's
not about race. Yes.
And racism. So fucking weird.
Yeah. So
but
foundation.
Also, the problem with that first statement is like, yeah, that is like its own internal definition. But kind of the thing is, we aren't misunderstanding it. We're criticizing how they define race, institutionalized racism, and racial caste system.
Let me finish with the definition, and then we'll look at it in depth. So, foundational questions that underlie CRT and the law include: how does the law construct race? It doesn't. How has the law protected racism and upheld racial hierarchies? It hasn't in the last 50 years. How does the law reproduce racial inequality? It fucking doesn't. And how can the law be used to dismantle race, racism, and racial inequality? The Civil Rights Act.
Yeah. Well, racial inequality, an example of that is affirmative action.
Yeah. So when
so
they're telling
I guess the government is still enforcing racial inequality.
Yeah.
By only offering
also
affirmative action to some students.
It also assumes that the role of the law is to dismantle these things. Like, no, it is not the purpose of the law to dismantle an attitude or belief that someone has And it is not the role of the law to dismantle racial inequality, just racial unfairness.
Yes, it is the law's
Yeah.
role to ensure that people are not discriminated against on an unchangeable characteristic. It's nothing else.
Yeah, the purpose of the law is to make sure that
Agree with that though as well.
fair and people are.
The only point where you should apply equality is equality of opportunity and equality under the law, and that's it.
Yeah, but I mean, like if you take the it's not fair to if you take it's not fair to you know, do things by unalienable characteristics, right? What if you're stupid? If you're stupid, right? You're stupid. There's no making you less stupid. You can teach somebody stuff, but you can't teach them. You can't make a person be able to think faster, better. You can only teach them facts and learning things, right? So if you're stupid, that means you can't get a certain kind of job because you're stupid.
You sound
How is
like
that any
that.
different?
You
How
sound
is
like
that
that
any-
based army guy in the IQ.
Yeah, but how is it okay to not give a person a job because they're stupid? But it's okay. But
Well,
anything else you can't.
It's quite simple,
Because
really,
it affects
because
their
they are not capable of performing the job role.
Right, exactly. I mean, and that's the kind of thing where. Well, that's the thing where it isn't.
If I have a disabled person, I have to make my office in a way that they can come into the office and do the job. Right? They're not capable of doing the job without me making modifications to the job. So
There's no
why do I just have?
modifications needed
There are
to
modifications.
get
Like,
someone of
I
a
can
different race.
I mean,
Yeah, no,
I think the question is whether.
Logical end.
Well, the question is whether or not it's relevant. For example, one instance in which everyone agree that racial discrimination is entirely appropriate. Like if you were making a movie about the life of Martin Luther King, you're obviously going to racially discriminate in the casting process for the actor who plays Martin Luther King. You're not going to hire a white guy to do it.
Yeah, because
You know
they're
who I'd want to play
inherently
Martin Luther
incapable.
King?
They're inherently incapable of performing the job role. Just because a disabled person needs a fucking wheelchair ramp to get into the office to do computer work doesn't mean they're inherently incapable of doing the job.
Well, I mean, we have blackface paints. No, you know how I'd want to play Martin Luther King? Sean King.
Oh, God.
I have to say, though, like, after a couple months, after 2.5 months of not being able to stairs last year, using them for the first time was like a thrill. It gave me a rush.
Yeah, so these journalists are telling other journalists that they need to familiarize themselves with what critical race theory is and is not. That way they'll know when the term is being misused. Sure,
Careful
using
with
your
your wording
definition.
They're not journalists.
Oh,
Don't
sorry,
give them
yes,
that
journalist.
miscredit.
Anyway, moving on.
Or pieces of shit. That works too.
Yeah, either way.
Again, I can't hear urinalist by saying instead of.
Guys, I need to go now because first of all, it's nearing bedtime because late night job. Also, we're so far out to the sea now that the internet is crapping out, so I'm just gonna leave instead of just going full robot on you.
Okay, man.
Alright, Shadilay.
Alright.
Catch you later.
Shadow,
Later, guys.
brother.
Bye.
Boom.
So, the alleged journalists are telling themselves
That's pretty good.
are telling themselves that they need to familiarize themselves with what critical race theory is and is not by using a faulty definition of critical race theory. That they're intentionally using a flawed definition that they know is different to what everyone else is calling it. clearly to people like the conservatives and sane people, critical race theory inherently suggests that there is something wrong about white people. Which it does. Because they assume, where they say they assume that white supremacy is evil. But the problem is, they consider white supremacy to be white people being equal to black people. Even using their own definition, it's racist. And of course, Kimberly Crenshaw, yep, renowned racist.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the problem, that fucking, the definition is accurate through their lens, but the problem is, it is that Mott and Bailey switch where they give that definition, knowing how the average person understands those terms, but the definition they give is through the lens of their redefinition of the terms.
Yes, exactly. So, the other thing they want them so-called journalists to do is, when sources assert that critical race theory is un-American or unpatriotic, ask them to define American and patriotic. Include their responses in your coverage.
Okay. America is founded on liberalism.
Yes, America is founded on the concept of life, liberty, and freedom. And critical race theory wants to restrict people's freedom, therefore it's un-American. Kiss my ass.
Based?
I mean, and critical race theory it's definitely unpatriotic. It is directly opposed to the history and cultural mythos of it uses flaws of great people to completely tear them down and make it so that we can't respect or venerate anyone in our history who lived more than 60 years ago. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is that even our great accomplishments, like Brown v. Board of Education, the critical race theorists shit on it and go, oh, well, that's just secretly white racism coming out even more.
Yes, it was white racism when the president ordered the National Guard to go force the white people to let the black kids in.
Of course.
And one of these idiots goes on to say, critical race theory asks, why isn't everyone getting equal justice? How can it be un-American to strive for equality? Well, I'm not smart enough to tell you what logical fallacy that is, but it's clearly a fallacy. Because critical race theory does not ask why everyone isn't getting equal justice. It assumes that they're not getting equal justice, and then it assumes that the correct response to this inaccurate assumption is to shit all over white people.
Yeah,
and critical
race theory, says abolish whiteness and then defines English common law as a part of whiteness and is openly against standards like the neutrality of law and equal application of law to all peoples. That is equal justice. Critical theory and critical race theory is directly opposed to equal justice. And how can it be un-American to strive for equality? Well, it depends on what form of equality you're talking about. America is inherently anti-communist.
Well, that's it. Are you after equality of opportunity or equality of outcome? Because equality of opportunity is American, equality of outcome is communist.
Well, okay, equality of rights is American. Equality of opportunity can only be pushed to a certain... if you push for absolute equality of opportunity, it's tyrannical.
True, but it's equality of opportunity under the law is what we're really at, and how it should be. There is nothing that the law does not prevent any black person from doing anything they want.
Because if you do really poke hard enough at equality of opportunity, it starts to fall apart. You'll have stuff, I don't have degree in psychology, yet I should be a psychologist. I should have the opportunity to become a psychologist.
Well, a more realistic outcome would be you're looking at education. Oh, I don't have rich parents, therefore either the government pays for me to go to private school, or we get rid of private schools.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I
again,
thought it was a race to the bottom, isn't it?
it is. And
Oh, so go.
where it falls apart is that the moment you start doing that, you start hitting into issues of restricting other people's freedoms.
Well, you would really need to have all children raised by the state so that they have the same.
Pretty sure Orwell foresaw it going that way. Wait, was
And
Orwell?
Huxley.
Yep. Taking the children, raising them in their creches.
Yeah.
So even with the better types of equality, it assumes equality. It assumes it's the only value and does not ever tend into tension with other values.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you have equality, what else do you need?
Food would be a nice start. Because
Well,
Yeah, but freedom conflicts with equality.
Well, I always say the same thing to whenever I talk to a communist and they go on about me having too much stuff. I say, well, how exactly would you redistribute my wealth? How would you do it? Because I don't have any money. I've only got stuff, right? I've got stuff. I've got lots of stuff. I haven't got any money.
Sell your stuff and distribute the money.
No, but how do you do that?
yeah, how do you sell it when nobody has property?
I've got 40,000.
Sell it to the government, of course. The
I've got
government
40,000
is allowed to have property.
I've got a £40,000 watch. If you equal the money across the entire population, no one has £40,000. So who do you sell it
No.
to? Who gets my Bentley? Who gets my other sports cars? Who gets my stuff?
Obviously,
The glorious leader,
no
of
one
course. The glorious leader gets
Luxury.
it all.
Oh God, I
luxury
actually
items either go to the glorious leader or they get torn down into their essential parts. And like you take all the iron off of it and you melt it and you make it into an iron ingot. That's it. Use the iron ingot.
You destroy the value of all things.
Essential. Well, yes,
Like
you
a
don't
plow.
need luxury
Plow.
items.
Yeah, but the world's full of luxury items. How do you
Well,
redistribute them?
those are wants, not needs. We only need to take care of the needs.
No, but you can't. Redistribution of wealth is not a matter of. There's more wealth in stuff than there is money.
Well, yes, that stuff will be reclaimed into things that you can use to fulfill the needs of the people, comrade.
Well, how do you reclaim my? I've got a £6,000 Eames chair. How do you reclaim that?
It will be torn down into its raw materials and used for other purposes.
which would make it ultimately less in value.
Yes,
Of course.
It makes it valueless.
But no, I actually remember
It just
on-
doesn't work. It's just a stupid. It comes from a time when all the value was in money, and there's no money anymore.
Well, I also remember back a few years ago on This Week in Stupid, there was actually an article that was like, parents, you shouldn't read to your children when they go to bed because you might be giving them an unfair advantage over other children.
Oh
Yeah.
my god.
Stop treating your kids well because other people don't treat. If you're not beating your children, if your black neighbor's beating their children, you better fucking beat your children too.
If your black neighbor is beating your children, I think you should call the police.
No, but that's racist.
Oh,
All
yeah,
children
of
should-
course. I'm sorry,
all children should be abused. All children should be abused in case one child is being abused
Yes.
to keep them all equal. That's the argument, yeah.
Yeah, of course.
So let's get on to the holy 8 questions. Of
Yes, the
critical
8
race theory.
questions to uncover important details, often missing from news coverage of critical race theory. Question 1. Do the people speaking out for and against critical race theory actually understand what it is? Yes, they
they're
do,
the only-
but you're going to reject their definition with your made-up fancy
Despite them
bullshit
reading
words.
your text
Yes, they will
I
read
think
your
it's word by
textbooks
word.
to your face, and you will then deny their definition because they are using it to reject the whole concept.
Yep. Like, the people arguing against it seem to be the people actually citing the literature.
Funny how that works.
Well, if you're citing the literature, then you've obviously missed the point.
Yeah.
Clearly. Question 2. How did this issue become a news story? Ask follow-up questions like, who is creating events in the community is one way to create news. Who's making these statements? Who is making this an issue? And is this even an issue? The conservatives are making this an issue because they don't want you to teach their children to hate each other.
No, the left made it an issue when they were pushing that to begin with. Like, what this is that, like, meme that Ben Shapiro uses all the time where it's like, the left does something terrible, and then the headline is, conservatives pounce.
Yeah.
Oh, the conservatives are trying to stir up a culture war.
No, it's like, no. The left made the first attack. It just so happens that the reprisal is the one that's treated as the first attack. It's like,
Whoa,
Jesus, guys.
You're responding to the things we did? What are you doing? Are you trying to start a culture war?
Yeah, it's like that meme of shoveling shit over the fence and then screaming abuse when more people shovel it back.
Well, it's also saying who, the implication being, oh, it's those bad people. Right-wingers, ooh!
Woo! Conservatives!
Well, the thing is, it's not just like the fucking conservative news pundits and people who are like normally hyper politically engaged. It's like the parents who are seeing what their children are being taught and take issue with it. It's normal fucking people.
So, the white supremacists, of course.
Yeah, of course.
The white supremacists.
But I think that shows how much of an issue it is. It's not like shit like the Duluth model, where it needs to be people who actually understand this shit and on a philosophical level and are going, no, it's bullshit from the ground up. Like, this is parents going, the teacher told my son he's evil because he's white. Fuck that.
If it's not an issue, then why do you have all these journalists communicating with each other about how to defend it?
That's a very good point.
Wow, you're a conspiracy theorist now? Of course they didn't talk to each other. They just all thought of that independently at the same time.
Yep.
Well, yeah, but you can't say that.
Of course not.
If you dare to repeat what they say openly, they call you a conspiracy theorist.
Yep.
Shut up, bigot.
So, magical question 3, which brings us back to our Mott and Bailey. Do any schools or school districts in the US, including in local communities, teach critical race theory, or have they in the past? Well, universities do. You've already admitted to that. 2, whose definition of critical race theory are we using? Are we using the magical structures of race in law, or are we using teaching white and black kids to hate each other?
Well, it's also like, this is like the equivalent of essentially if schools were like teaching, shit about like Jews being an infestation and like cockroaches and like fucking, sneaking into the country and like subverting it and all that other shit. And how they're like subverting the pure race of the homeland and blood and soil. And the left was like, what the fuck? You're teaching Nazism. It's like, well, no, technically we're not teaching any of Hitler's writings directly. It's like, no, but it's the same fucking ideas. Like, they wouldn't accept that deflection if it was the other way.
Well, that ties into their next question as well. Which individuals or groups' opinions and experiences are missing from news coverage of this issue? Well, not the people who are in favour of critical race theory, they're the one writing the pissing news. It's the conservatives that are being restricted. What the fuck are you talking about?
They've literally sent Robin DiAngelo, Ibram X. Kendi, and all these other people on media tours and education to, like, fucking instruct teachers on how to spread their ideas.
And you're against that?
Yes.
It's like the only reason that our perspective is in the news is because we've made enough noise about it. But like the real question is, because I don't think anyone's opinions and experiences are missing from the news coverage of the issue. I think the real question is which individuals or groups' opinions and experiences are missing from the teaching and the education system.
Yes. That would be a very useful question, but we don't want that. Instead, what we want to know is, for example, question 5. What are teachers and school district administrators saying? Who fucking cares?
Well, we know that they're telling children to become white traitors and white abolitionists.
Yes, they're teaching children to be aware of their race and how their race impacts others and how they're evil and need to stand up and apologize for that.
And we also know some teachers are like keeping a fucking weird Orwellian shit list of the parents who were speaking out about it.
Yeah. And again, that ties into the next question. What are the people who oppose teaching kids about CRT and racial inequality worried about? Teaching kids that people should be judged on their race. You know, the thing that we decided was bad in the 60s and was quite popular for a couple of decades?
Well, maybe we
like,
shouldn't have decided that in the 60s. Maybe we should go back and reconsider. You see, if you don't see race, that's white supremacist.
Well, it's also really dishonest because it's this weird kind of gaslighting obfuscation. What are they worried about? If you listen to them, they tell you exactly what they're worried about.
Exactly, and these are regular people saying it, not academics or the educated laymen like us. This is regular, run-of-the-mill, off-the-street people. They don't have the years of dealing with this shit to have the big words. They're telling you how it is. Like, it could not get any more plain language.
Well, you see, they're using their own terms. They haven't studied it. They're not an insider, so therefore they cannot critique it.
Yes, exactly.
It's like they looked at the abolition of man and they said, "Hey, what if we did that for our ideology with the Tao?"
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like you cannot critique it from the outside, only from the inside.
Yep. Which is why they asked, do critics of CRT have a firm understanding of how teachers present and explore issues around race and racial inequality in the classroom? Yes, we do. Thanks to learning from home due to COVID, parents have now seen what you scum are teaching their kids. And they have a firm understanding of why it's evil.
They were really worried about that.
Well, yeah, exactly. Well, that's the thing. They present this as if, like, oh, it's a bad thing that critics and parents aren't familiar enough with what they're really teaching. It's this dishonest tack because, like, you know, they were like, how do we keep parents out of here so that they don't know what we're teaching their children? Like, they deliberately obfuscate it, and, you know, news people are saying, oh, critical race theory is just teaching that slavery happened. If they don't understand, it is not the fault of the critics, it is the fault of its defenders.
Exactly. And again, question 8, which is my favourite of the lot. Who benefits when there is widespread confusion or misunderstanding about what critical race theory is? The fucking teachers and journalists.
Yep.
Because
the
they're
people
the ones
who promote critical race theory.
Yes, the people who promote it are the ones benefiting from the confusion or misunderstanding. Because they're the ones trying to pretend that it isn't inherently racist. It's utterly ludicrous. Like, you actually look at the moment you look at who benefits from it, it's the teachers and the other associated Marxists.
I hate these people.
Me too. And then we get to point 4 of their lovely list. Investigate the potential impact of teaching K-12 students about race and racial inequality. Again, obfuscation But it's unlikely that many public schools are teaching kids about CRT, but teachers frequently discuss race, racism, and racial inequality in class. Yes, you morons. It's not that they discuss race, racism, and racial inequality in class. The civil rights movement should be part of their education. But that's not what you're doing, and you fucking know it.
Well, they're attacking a straw man here.
Yeah, they've made a lovely straw man, and now they're attacking it. Because what they're going is, but they're teaching them about race, racism, and racial inequality, and that's a good thing. Sure,
They know they can't defend their actual position.
In theory, but then you look at how they're doing it. White supremacy. White people have privilege. Or those two schools in Australia where they told the white male Christian kids to stand up and apologise for their race. That shit doesn't come out of anywhere but critical race theory.
Oh, God.
Wait a minute. Scroll back up. There's this very telling point. Okay, George's students have expressed disappointment that significant parts of American history were excluded from their lessons in grade school. The college students want that, George says. Now, this is a professor who teaches critical race theory. So, the people who choose to take a class on critical race theory want critical race theory. I mean, that is such a nothing statement. Like, the fact that she's trying to take the people who chose to take a class on critical race theory as being representative of the entire population of students is such an obvious logical fallacy. Like, no, like, there is a very extreme selection bias in that sample.
Yeah. And I
so extreme, it is completely useless in making any kind of statement about the wider population. I mean, it's like if you used a bunch of people who went to a church and they're like, oh, well, this is proof that everyone in the country wants to be a Christian. Like, no.
Almost as if she hadn't studied a proper scientific discipline.
Yeah.
I talked to all these people who came to my KKK meeting, and people in the country, they want white supremacy.
Like a really good example, because we can actually compare apples to apples in this case, is seminary schools. Okay, let's go to a seminary school and ask the students who would have liked to have heard more about Christianity in high school. I think your sample size would be 100 out of 100.
Yeah, I mean, it's
like people who want to hear about the thing want to hear more about the thing in the past. Like, shit, really?
No way.
People are desperate for white supremacy. I mean, the Democrats especially are desperate to find some. The media is desperate to find some. And then some white supremacists are desperate to find some. But mostly the people who really want to find white supremacy are not other white supremacists.
Regular CNN commentator Richard Spencer.
Yeah. He'd love to find more white supremacy. He's very lonely, I suspect.
Indeed.
I would just like to see some evidence that white people aren't actually superior.
Yeah. Another sentence I love is academic research suggests high school students benefit when educators stop teaching history from a predominantly white perspective and present it in a way that connects with the cultural backgrounds of their students. Okay, so firstly, academic research. Right, so your biased bullshit studies with cherry-picked samples. Stop teaching history from a predominantly white perspective. Okay, sure, let's teach history from a non-white perspective. Okay, you have the Aztec and the Maya, and then you have mud huts, and that's fucking it for the rest of the next 10,000 fucking years.
No, but it says benefits them. how does it benefit them? Where is the benefit? Does it benefit them in helping them pass? Because I have a sneaking suspicion if they did a normal history exam with just that guy teaching them history, they might have some fucking holes.
Well, it's also like she warns that kids who do not receive a holistic view of U.S. history could develop a distorted sense of themselves and their roles in society. When you don't understand people and their contributions, you really do develop this distorted sense of yourself and also irrational fears about people who are different from you. And it's like, are you like Martin Luther King Jr. is venerated in our society. Long before critical race theory was being taught in public school, we had Black History Month.
Yeah.
Like, we know that slavery happened.
Yeah.
Like, nobody is objecting to the idea that slavery happened. They're objecting to this historical revisionism where the War of Independence was supposedly fought to preserve slavery, and Abraham Lincoln was like a covert white supremacist who was just, keeping white supremacy more under the covers, and that Brown v. Board is really a white supremacist decision.
Okay, so just to answer Oil's question of what the benefit was, at the end of the academic year, 96% of students who took these courses reported having a better understanding of how racial and ethnic minorities had experienced the past. Right, okay. More than three-quarters of...
Is it?
Hey?
And that's the benefit. That's the whole benefit.
Yeah, that's the whole benefit. More than three-quarters of the 114 students surveyed said they could remember more of what they learned in these classes than they had in other history classes they had taken. No shit! That was the most recent one, you fucking bellends!
Yeah. And also, they taught them things that their biases liked. And also, there was less history to learn because they didn't teach them the white stuff.
Exactly. But no interest in dates. There was slavery, and then there was Jim Crow, and that's all you ever need to know.
Well, that's all that really happened in history, of course.
Well, you also see the Mott and Bailey they're pushing here. They're once again just kind of saying, oh, critical race theory is just teaching about black people's history in America. No.
Well, they go on to say, George says it's important for all young people to recognise racism remains a significant problem today, citation needed, and that past inequities such as slavery and racial segregation continue to influence the lives of racial and ethnic minorities. Fucking bullshit. A lot of people will say, that's so long ago, that's not relevant, it doesn't matter now, George says. That does matter. No, it fucking doesn't.
Well, the thing is, you look at Ben Shapiro, and he's like, yes, okay, gang, it happened. And yes, it would have had some knock-on effects, okay, gang, right? And so, but the idea that America's system as currently constituted is actively oppressing or opposing black people is just absolutely asinine. So again, they're doing the Mott and Bailey. They're walking back the claim that they're actually making.
It really hurts.
And you can tell you can tell because they're not actually engaging with any of the criticism. They're talking around the criticism.
Of course, because if they actually engaged with it, the discussion would be over in minutes.
Exactly. As conservative, for example, might say something along the lines of, it's teaching the white students that they are collectively guilty for the black students' lives. And then they'll go, oh, but we're just teaching about racial inequality in the past. It's like, no. Address the actual fucking argument. But
yeah, exactly.
They wouldn't do that now, would they?
It's all so tiring.
It truly is.
Oh, what? Okay, let me see.
Hi, I hope you enjoyed this segment from the Sultans of Shadilay podcast.
If you like this segment, please click like, comment, and subscribe. Also, check out the full podcast in the description below.